This is a Film Stories original podcast.
The Who's Down in Who Newville were making their list, but some didn't know Walmart has the best brands for their gifts.
What about toys? Do they have brands kids have been wanting all year?
Yep, Barbie, Tony's, and Lego. Gifts that will make them all cheer.
Do you mean they have all the brands I adore?
They have Nintendo, Nespresso, Apple, and more.
What about...
So the Who answered questions from friends till they were blue. Each one listened and shouted, from Walmart? Who knew? Shop gifts from top brands for everyone on your list in the Walmart app.
Every story you love, every invention that moves you, every idea you wished was yours, all began as nothing. Just a blank page with a blinking cursor, asking a simple question. What do you see? Great ideas start on Mac. Find out more on apple.com/Mac.
This is Writers on Film, the only podcast dedicated to books on cinema.
Yep, you'll get a little message now.
There you go. I'll okay that. Beautiful. Well, I'm back for a second bite of the Writers on Film cherry. I'm very excited about that.
I'll do the intro. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Writers on Film. My name is John Bleasdale. I'm a writer and film critic, and today I'm delighted to be joined by David Hughes for the second time, David, or the third time?
Yeah. I think it's the second time, and I can't even remember what didn't we talk about Heat 2 or something last time? Or maybe that was a bit off topic, but
oh no, that might have been that. This might then be the third time because I think we talked about your books the first time.
Right.
The greatest movies never made, the greatest science fiction movies never made. Of course, your David Lynch book and your Stanley Kubrick book, which I've got downstairs, and the other ones I've got on my iPad. And do I really have them? If they're on my iPad,
Right.
Whereas the one downstairs is I can see the spine when I walk past, and I can smile dreamily as I read the words Stanley Kubrick, David Hughes.
Well, and I've been savoring your Darkness. What is it? Darkness Visible, the Jonathan Glazer book, and doing a bit of. It's been so crazy. I mean, that book has led me down so many weird paths as well with the sort of further reading stuff. And I mean, I know I keep like posting about it, saying like, oh my God, like great film analysis is my favorite thing I think in the world. It's ridiculous. And some of the connections that you make. But I mean, I've been led to Joan Didion. I've been led to Max Mon Amour, the film in which Charlotte Rampling falls in love with a chimpanzee, and, which is a like perfectly great movie. But I put that up against, I think I watched that the day after I watched Birth, or rewatched Birth for the first time in many years, well, since it came out really, and just like fell in love with it all over again. And it's amazing. And Sexy Beast led me to Gangster #1, led me to write to the screenwriters of Sexy Beast to ask if they would come on the Rogue Commentary, audio commentary podcast. I haven't heard back from them yet because, but my God, what a conversation that would be.
That would be superb.
I mean, there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about Sexy Beast. It's just one of those incredible movies that I just can't escape, Just fantastic. A small and perfect body of work Jonathan Glazer has. It's really something.
It absolutely is. It's a quartet of amazing films, and even when you go into his music videos, it's not like he's done as many of his contemporaries. So even though it's like, oh, he's done a lot of music videos, he's done like a couple of dozen rather than 50 or 60, which someone like Mark Romneck has done, for instance. The advertising he's done a little bit more, but again, it's not like it's not like, say, Ridley Scott did 200 adverts before he made a film, and so he was absolutely, he certainly did a fair few, but it really Yeah, there's a bit of news about Sexy Beast actually. They are doing a 4K Blu-ray DVD on that, and the commentary track is going to be very exciting. I'm not sure if I can say anything, so I'll leave it at that.
Right. Okay. Wow. That's amazing.
So
Well, I mean, that is one of the we were talking about film formats before we came on the air and sort of,
mm,
discussing like things like Vista, whatever. To be honest, Sexy Beast is one of those films that I think would look. I'm not a 4K guy particularly, but it is one of those films that I think would look amazing in 4K because there's just something about the blistering sunshine of it and the darkness of the dark parts and the brightness of that, whatever. I mean, I'm just remembering that thing you said about the four elements being present, with the boulder representing like earth, the water in the swimming pool representing water, and the little fan, the fire of the sunshine, and the handheld fan being wind. And I just thought, oh my God, John, where are you? Why are you so away? I can't literally hug you after reading this amazing this amazing paragraph of analysis. So, your kind of writing is what I aspire to in my own film analysis, but you're much more sort of well-read and better at making connections than I am. So
oh,
I just have to prostrate myself at your feet.
oh, that's so generous. The first Amazon review was
So I can better blow smoke up your ass.
I shall assume the position. The first Amazon review said I gave up after page 10 when he started making comparisons between sort of Smeagol and the Ben Kingsley character, and he was like, "This guy just seems to want to make as many references as possible," and I wasn't interested. So it's like
Right.
you can't please all the people all the time. So it's nice to hear that I've pleased someone. you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, keep doing the great work. So, yeah, thanks for having me on. So I'm here to talk about a book that I haven't written.
Yes, exactly. This is Night Moves, a novelization. I think you'd call it a novelization by Alan Sharp on the 1975 film starring Gene Hackman, the late lamented and much regretted loss of Gene Hackman. Um, Directed by Arthur Penn. This is a sort of neo-noir film, and by many, including myself, is considered a classic. I remember coming across this film, reading about it in Robert Colker's Cinema of Loneliness when I was a kid, from a library book that I took out from Barrow and Furness Library several times, and looked at pictures of things like the Wild Bunch many, many years before I actually saw the films. So Night Moves was one of
Wow.
these films where it lived in my head for a fair few years before I actually got to see it. These in the days before spoilers were a thing, so I didn't mind at all knowing exactly what happened at the end of a picture. I was
What a
similar.
watch list that book must have created in you.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, I read it before I saw Taxi Driver. I read it before I saw, much Scorsese. I think I'd seen Color of Money at the time. I don't think I'd seen many
Mm.
others. Um, so yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And it stands up to this day. I think it's a great book. And of course, I've had him on as a guest for Kubrick. But let's talk about Night Moves, and let's talk about your publication of this book, which is part of
Mm.
the beginning of a project which is linked to a company you own, correct?
Yeah, basically. So we've been putting out Blu-rays of films for the past sort of 5 years or so. It was a bit of a lockdown project, and I don't know if I've told you how it actually started, but basically we in lockdown with all the cinemas closed and my day job kind of on the back burner. Because I make movie trailers and social media ads and stuff like that for a living, but so there wasn't a lot of that going around at the time, and I decided it was finally time to launch my audio commentary podcast, Rogue Commentary. Um, and I just sort of I didn't have any guests, so I just sort of reached around to everybody I knew. And one of the guys I knew was Richard Holmes, who had produced a film starring Peter Capaldi and written by Peter Capaldi called Soft Top Hard Shoulder. And basically, I got him on I got him to record a commentary with that film's director, and they recorded it to like a low res VHS rip that was on YouTube. And when I wanted to put out the episode, I realized that, well, nobody actually has like access to the film, so they can't like cue it. I mean, you can listen to these commentaries in isolation, but if you want to cue them up to the film. So I said, well, if only we could get the film out on Blu-ray, that'd be amazing. And Richard, well, I actually have like an HD like print of it, a really nice digital copy. And I was like, okay, all right, give me 24 hours and I'll look into it. And then I came back to him 24 hours later with a proposal to launch, to release a Blu-ray of it. And we kind of signed a single page deal memo and whatever. And then I got artwork commissioned and I figured out how to make Blu-rays and stuff. And I basically launched an e-commerce site. And that was how Plumeria sort of started. And then I thought, oh, I like this Blu-ray releasing lark. So I kind of picked up the rights to it. The last one we did was Horde, a wonderful, wonderful film, which was the second film that we'd licensed from Vertigo, the UK distributor, after The Big Man, for which I did the director David Leland's last interview.
Oh wow!
As a commentary, which was pretty amazing. I got to sort of go out and spend the day with him in this amazing movie memorabilia house from his long career and just do a whole career retrospective. Little did I know that he was kind of dying of cancer at the time and would only live another 6 months after that interview. So it was quite, bittersweet, but beautiful to get that movie out, and we remastered it and, all of that stuff. Anyway, and then I decided that I was going to sort of like diversify Plumeria into, I'm such a like mercurial kind of rights Hoover upper. And we republished a long out of print novel called The Cooler, which was written by George Markstein, who was the co-creator of the 1960s Patrick McGoohan TV show, The Prisoner. And we put that novel back in print in kind of a really nice prestige edition. I'd been invited to do a screenplay adaptation of the book by the estate of George Markstein. And that didn't go anywhere. I think I did like 3 drafts of it or something like that, and it never got made. But I knew the novel was still out there, and it's a cracking novel. Commissioned a new cover, commissioned an introduction from the president of the Prisoner Appreciation Society or something like that, and just basically figured out how to make paperbacks, And then so that came out. It did pretty well. We kind of broke even on that one, I think. And then I suppose I was looking at, I'll be honest with you, what I really wanted to do is I wanted to do a full run of either novelizations or novels that have been adapted into movies but have been sort of long forgotten, that the source novel has been long forgotten because the books were out of print. But I also kind of was interested in bringing a prestige series of novelizations out, and I was looking at like Escape from New York and novelizations that you can still pick up on the secondhand market, and they're great if you can find them in like charity shops and whatever. But there was only ever, Night Moves is one of my favorite films, and there was only ever one edition of it, and that was the $1.25 paperback that was brought out by like, I don't know, Corgi or something like that in 1975. Sort of, the film flopped, the book didn't go anywhere. Out of print for 50 years. 2025 is the 50th anniversary of Night Moves. Criterion were doing their, a fantastic new edition of the film. And I just thought, I got to track this down. So somehow I got to the estate of Alan Sharp, the novelist turned screenwriter, who had novelized his own script because he was unhappy with Arthur Penn's adaptation, which, to me is pretty hard to believe. But then Alan Sharp's a pretty idiosyncratic guy, and I mean, so I got hold of the estate. I negotiated for the rights. I knew that Tony Stella, the amazing film poster designer, had done
such a good cover.
Oh my God. He'd done this painting, and he'd done a Twitter post or something like that, where it was probably accompanied by a teardrop emoji where he'd said, "No one's ever used this artwork I did for Night Moves." And I was like, hello, the stars are lining up. So I contacted Tony. He said, how much for the painting, love, you know.
Yeah.
And the next thing I knew, oh yeah, and I also got I commissioned a new introduction by Matthew Asprey Gear, who had written the book about the making of Night Moves, to
Friend
do a
of the
little.
podcast.
Right, there you go. You know, great guy. And the guy who was the official like archivist and biographer of Alan Sharp, who is a guy called David Manderson, and I got him to do an afterword. So I had the preamble, the introduction by Matthew, which is all about how Alan Sharp had grown up on like westerns and Humphrey Bogart movies and whatever, and now it was the 70s and they were all being the whole revisionist kind of thing was happening. Neo-noir was a kind of thing, revisionist westerns were coming about, and obviously he'd written a bunch of westerns, which I mean you could generously call revisionist, but they were just basically interesting stories told about the old west that were just a teeny bit less manifest destiny than the westerns that had gone before. And a bunch of them had been made into a film. I mean, there was Peter Fonda directed The Hired Hand.
A wonderful film, really good film.
Absolutely, with Peter Fonda and Warren Oates. I mean, that had me at hello pretty much. Ulzana's Raid with Burt Lancaster, directed by the Dirty Dozen's Robert Aldrich. Billy Two Hats, in which Gregory Peck sports an outrageous Scottish accent and also stars Desi Arnaz Jr. And it's directed by Ted Kotcheff. I mean, this is insane. And he'd already novelized The Hired Hand himself, if you can call it a novelization. I mean, I guess it is. He turned his screenplay into a novel. And my personal favorite is The Last Run, which stars George C. Scott and was going to be not a Western, was going to be directed by John Huston, but he had a big fight with George C. Scott. And so he was replaced by Richard Fleischer, who's almost impossible to say his name without using the word journeyman. But I really like The Last Run. And that was in 1971. So, he had kind of previous in terms of like the Western genre or whatever, and the neo-noir, if you can call like The Last Run a bit of a neo-noir as well. But I mean, Night Moves is just obviously an enduring kind of low-key classic, whose reputation has only grown since it sort of came out and flopped the same year as, Jaws.
I mean,
out.
yeah, I mean, I would say a sort of thread that runs through all of his work, and Ulzana's Raid, I would also, The Hired Hand, Ulzana's Raid, are beyond decent westerns. Are very good. I mean, Ulzana's Raid is, I mean, Peter Fonda, Warren Oates, you already know you're going to get something very different, and it's got that level of pessimism and a level of elegiac and a sense of realism that you don't get much in sort of westerns from the 50s, say. But with Ulzana's Raid, you've got Burt Lancaster, and so it's really a sort of 50s star, and the level of violence and brutality in that film is, I would say, comparable to Hostiles, the recent western with Christian Bale and Rosamund Pike and Wes Studi, the late lamented Wes Studi. I think it's fantastic, and there's a real double bill to be had there, because it's all about tragedy, but the thing that connects all of his screenplays seems to be this real pessimism. There's very few of his films have happy endings. In fact, I haven't seen all of them. I haven't seen Billy Two Hats, which coincidentally is the name I have for my privates, but. I'm sorry, that was too easy. Talk about putting a hat on a hat. So it's this pessimism. Let's go back to who Alan Sharp is, because I think this is something that a lot of our listeners won't necessarily. They'll know who Arthur Penn is and Gene Hackman and all these people, but not necessarily who Alan Sharp is. And one thing that might be surprising to people listening to us talk about westerns and film noir and everything is the fact this guy's Scottish.
Yeah, as more Scottish than Gregory Peck. if that's possible. Um, yeah. So, I mean, basically, he had a very interesting background. He was adopted, I think, at 6 weeks old or something like that. He kind of grew up in Scotland, became a novelist, a television writer, playwright, radio writer. I mean, every medium he'd kind of attacked at some point. And then he also had, like, he famously had an affair with Beryl Bainbridge, who wrote the novel Sweet William, based on her relationship with Alan Sharp. So he had this kind of, and then when he sort of escaped to Hollywood either at the tail end of the 60s or the very beginning of the 70s, he was kind of sort of running away from lots of controversial things happening in his private life, and then chaos ensued when he landed, this kind of hard-boiled sort of Scottish guy, started turning up at Hollywood parties. And obviously, it's just that run of films that he had with these kind of, at least well-known directors and famous leading men and stuff like that. He was obviously very much in the mix at the time. And I think he'd kind of tuned in to that new pessimism that the cinema of the 70s kind of does so well. And it's, probably no other decade in which that's been more kind of pronounced. So, he had done a lot of work in various media, and he was a fairly acclaimed kind of Scottish novelist, but more of but not a bestseller. And I think he sort of really, for that half a decade or so in the 70s, he really kind of found his footing, and then ended up working in television, which, obviously he knew wasn't as prestigious, but paid better, and got a lot more stuff produced in television. And I think part of the appeal of him, as far as a television writer, was that he'd worked in feature films. Not successfully, but certainly, and not prolifically particularly, but he did have this kind of reputation. And that was quite an unusual thing, because obviously working in television, you started in television, you made Duel, and then you went on to make Sugarland Express and Jaws and what have you. You didn't really go back. And it was only in the sort of past decade or so that television lost its, I mean, even when like Woody Harrelson and Matthew McConaughey turned up in True Detective, we were still going like, ooh, like, oh, it's a big deal. And now, the big stars on television are a dime a dozen. But it was kind of unusual in those days. And he did make some interesting television. But then he went back to cinema, and he wrote Rob Roy, the Liam Neeson movie. And he wrote the screenplay for an unmade film about Robert Burns, which is, widely regarded as to those who've read it, as the definitive Robert Burns movie. And he wrote an adaptation of Dean Stanley, which is a great little film, which has a tiny, tiny reputation, but an adaptation of Lord Dunsany's not. I mean, just crazy kind of stuff. And unfortunately, died before his later works could be brought to the screen. But so somebody to go from like Night Moves to Rob Roy, I mean, who doesn't want to hear about that guy?
Yeah, absolutely.
25 years between films or something like that.
Absolutely. And look, I mean, screenwriters, they don't tend to have like careers that are as prolific through no fault of their own, prolific as, say, directors. There's very few Robert Towns and William Goldmans, and even Robert Town and William Goldman, if you look at their IMDb page, a lot of it is rewriting other people's stuff.
Yeah.
And that's their bread and butter, and their actual number of sort of like projects that they've worked on sort of as original screenplays are fairly few and far between.
Yeah.
Adaptation is not is no. There's no shame in that either, of course. But well, to talk a little bit about novelizations as well, because novelizations, we've had Alan Dean Foster on the podcast, who I always think of as the poet laureate of the novelization.
100%.
But this idea of I mean, Alan Dean Foster is a science fiction writer who very much considers the novelizations as a a paid job, a gun for hire. Um, and novelists have done this before, where they've written novelizations of works they've produced. Christopher Wood novelized his own screenplays for the James Bond movies, for instance, even though those novels already existed by Ian Fleming. He did Moonraker, and he did The Spy Who Loved Me, which will appear, by the way, in the James Bond book club later this month. So that's an
Nice.
upcoming attraction. Who else did a screenplay of there might be another one that I'm missing, but those are, it's not, what I want to say is it's not without precedent that a screenwriter might do a sort of writer's cut of the film, because of course Alan Dean Foster can't move away from the script. He's given the script, and the novelization has to be the same as the script. He can't sort of invent stuff that's not in the film. So it's difficult for him. But of course, if you've written a screenplay, then it's your intellectual property, and you can do with it what you will, even post the film.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like 2001 is a pretty weird
that's a good example.
and unique example of like the novel being written while the screenplay is being written, and then they sort of come out at different times, but they're quite different, but obviously very interesting, probably the most interesting side by side comparison. I mean, I've got to admit, I know, like, I'm the guy who brought Night Moves back into print, but when you say, like, okay, it didn't quite work out the way that Alan Sharp saw it, so he novelized his own screenplay. I mean, what did you think in terms of whether it was like so, you can see why he disliked the film so much and wanted to bring his own screenplay out. I mean, without any spoilers, I find it quite hard to imagine the screenplay without picturing. Sorry, not the screenplay, the novelization. I couldn't read it without thinking of Gene Hackman. So unfortunately, I think if one of Alan Sharp's problems was that Gene Hackman made Harry Moseby's too sympathetic, then I couldn't escape that, because I couldn't set aside Gene Hackman and think who would be a less likable lead for it. So it doesn't really matter what Alan Sharp's intentions were. The film has ruined the novelization in some ways. But I also really loved the fact that he was writing in a kind of hard-boiled style, because you know that Night Moves wasn't the first screenplay that had a man with a failing private investigator with a company called Confidential, with a pebble glassed window, who was charging, a fee plus expenses, a daily rate of a fee,
$200 a day plus expenses.
Yeah, exactly. Who's looking for who's hired by a femme fatale, hired by a woman to find a young girl, who's kind of lost her way or whatever. So obviously he's playing with those conventions in a fantastic way, and yet there's sort of, I don't know, there's something about, yes, the character of Harry is deeply flawed, but Gene Hackman softens him. I know, like, look at his costumes. He's wearing like nice sweaters, and he's wearing lovely nubuck kind of, these polo necks and stuff like that. It's impossible not to love him and his style and everything like that. And he's failing really because he doesn't understand people, and that's the great thing about it. He gets played by everybody in the story. Just because he's a babe in the woods, he's
I think one of the biggest,
he's just a flawed man.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest differences for me would be that you get a lot more of what's going on you get a lot more backstory, and you get a lot more of what's going on inside Mosley's head, which is this idea of, first of all, the relationship, which is very much in the film, is very much something that's happened, but films have this thing that when that happened in scene 11 and we're on scene 14, so you're not really thinking about it so much. Whereas in the book, that's scene 13. He's still thinking about his relationship failing, even though he's investigating something else and he's somewhere else and he's doing something else. So it runs through the book as much more of a motivation for what he's doing, or a counter motivation. He really should go home and sort his life out. What's he doing this? And that's kind of one of the decisions he makes at a certain point, and then tragically ends up being pulled, just when I thought I was out, I get pulled back in, sort of moment.
Yeah.
And the other thing that is the backstory, so that's the sort of, not so much the backstory as the present story, the thing that the emotional weather that his character is undergoing. And then the other thing is this idea that he is a sort of former football star who is still, and I don't know much about American football, but that also means physically, I feel that he would be a bit bigger than Gene Hackman is in the movie, and more. I mean, there's a scene in the book where he plays a football game, like on a movie set. They're sort of having a break and they're playing some sort of touch football or whatever the form of American football is, and he sort of spots an alpha male who he wants to sort of impose himself on a bit, and sort of body checks him at one point, and wins over him, this slight sort of pissing contest they have, and they and again, I don't think that scene's in the film. It's a little bit of a while since I've seen the film, but it makes him more of a physical presence. And so there's another bit where there's a fight, and it's almost Jack Reacher-ish in his sort of like, I'm going to take you guys to pieces, and this is how I'm going to do it.
Who's first? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think those are aspects which are, it make what you're just saying absolutely chimes with me. It makes him into a hard man, with a capital H, and there's more misogyny in the book than in the film. But I'm not suggesting necessarily that the book is misogynistic, but there are more misogynistic attitudes expressed. I'm not sure whether that is showing the atmosphere. I think that's more Alan Sharp showing the attitudes around.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Than I don't think they're endorsed in any way by the novel.
Yeah.
So there is a harsher aspect to the book than in the film. I think that cinema. I think it goes back as well to what you were saying about revisionism, that cinema can't help. I mean, like a revisionist Western can't help re-endorsing the Western, because ultimately the Western aligns with cinema much more than it aligns with historical fact. So Unforgiven can spend all the time it wants revising ideas of violence, but at the very end it will give you a gunfight which will which will, you walk out of the cinema thinking, good old Clint, he nailed them. Gene
Hackman again.
Yeah, well, precisely, exactly. Yeah, so you'll watch the film and you'll think, oh, this is an interesting take on it. This is an interesting angle on that detective story. But it's, you could easily imagine Elliot Gould in this film, and of course, he stars in a similar sort of revisionist neo-noir in The Long Goodbye by Robert Altman.
Yeah.
And again, that's a difference between Bogart and Gould, is that Gould is a much softer, laid back character. He's just not, he's not as stony faced or hard hearted as Bogart at least presents, until he meets Lauren Bacall and goes all mushy.
Yeah. Well, he's only human.
Exactly, yeah, and of course, I mean, you can't look in Humphrey Bogart's eyes without seeing that puppy dog waiting to get out.
Right. I mean, there's a teeny bit of that in the Harry Moseby character for sure, but and I think he is a sympathetic character in the movie, not just because he's the protagonist and that he's the guy we're following, but I think we can understand the mistakes that he makes, and we can understand, the fact that the way that he's seduced. I mean, the woman who kind of seduces and really what's the word? Sorry, who really sort of spells his doom, was based on a woman that Alan Sharp knew. This kind of like earthy, barefoot, a woman that he met in, I forget where it was exactly. I think it might have been in Florida. And in fact, he dedicated the book to Paula wherever she may be found. This was his Paula. And I wonder if, although we might assume that, well, maybe Gene Hackman wasn't quite right, wasn't quite what Alan Sharp had in mind. I think it was impossible for him to see his muse portrayed on screen and get it right. So he wanted to kind of bring her to life a little bit more in the book, so there's part of that. But the thing is, I mean, talking about the football career, I mean, I love that Harry has had this kind of, not stardom, but I mean, we don't really here in Britain, we don't necessarily understand what the big deal about college football is, but Americans certainly do. And if he was like, he could have been famous as a kind of college football player. And people recognize him and say, hey, I remember you used to play for Notre Dame, or, whatever it was.
Yeah, absolutely.
The only college football team that I've heard of, And so there's that. So there's the bittersweetness of him having had his success behind him. The fact that his private investigation business is failing. And he's sort of now, struggling with the intellectual pursuit of chess, which he's fascinated by, but it's almost like football, but in a way that he can physically handle now.
Yeah,
and
so not so bad on the knees.
Yeah, exactly. So I think he's struggling a little bit there as well, because I never got the sense that he was like he's fascinated by these games of old that he likes to sort of set up and play out and think like, oh, look at these moves. And in his real life, he's making all the wrong moves. Obviously, everywhere he turns, he's blundering about. And so, I think it's a wonderful, wonderful sort of, I wouldn't exactly call him an anti-hero. It's a wonderful, flawed protagonist who, I have a hell of a lot of compassion for him and the situations that he finds himself in. And I definitely felt that I was looking to have more of a honest relationship with him in the novel. But Gene, you can't look past Gene.
No,
when you've had like a definitive performance. And I'm one of those people who thinks, if you wanted to, if it was announced that Ari Aster's next film was going to be a remake of Night Moves starring Joaquin Phoenix as Harry Moseby, I'd say, fucking bring it on, man. I'm not a sacred cows kind of guy. I mean, like, oh, that movie's so perfect you can't possibly touch it. No, fuck it, do it over and bring more viewers to the original and all of that. So they're not taping over the original,
Yeah.
So I see it as a lovely companion piece, and I'm really delighted that I've brought it back into print, and I definitely want to do more of these. But it's quite an obscure, subgenre to do, which is why I was looking for kind of, novelizations to maybe continue the series, like proper novelizations, because I don't know if there is a word. It is a novelization in a way. Obviously, as somebody who's written multiple books about movies that never got made, I'm dying to get some screenplays into print. And it is starting to happen. I mean, William Gibson's was it William Gibson's or
Alien 3?
Alien 3 got adapted as a like podcast series, and we were
Lance
talking
Hendrickson
about,
and
exactly, and we were talking
reading
about directors who haven't quite got their screenplay done right, so they put out a novel. I'm thinking of Darren Aronofsky's The Fountain. If you remember, that was going to be made with Brad Pitt and Cate Blanchett. They were building sets in Australia where it's going to be shot. And then I think with 8 weeks to go or 6 weeks to go, Brad Pitt quit the movie. And I remember sitting down in Hell's Kitchen with Darren Aronofsky, and he was saying, basically, they've said, I need a new Brad Pitt, or they're pulling the plug on the movie. Who is there? Who is there? And we went through a list of all the people who could step into that role. and they were either unsuitable. I mean, we literally wrote the list down on a pad in a cafe, and we were saying, "Oh, Jude Law, Matt Damon, who are the people who could be Brad Pitt in this movie, or it's all going to fall apart." Nobody was available, and then of course Aronofsky did the big prestigious graphic novel based on The Fountain, and then he fell in love with Rachel Weisz. He discovered Hugh Jackman in a play on Broadway, and it all came together, and then the film ended up getting made, and so now there are these sort of three versions. There's the unmade Brad Pitt, Kate Blanchett version, completely different movie. Aronofsky's father passed away in between writing the movie and making the movie, and that had a hell of a lot of influence on him falling in love for real for the first time, had a hell of a lot of influence on him. So just like wild kind of stories that are, and there aren't that many of them. So everyone is kind of interesting. And this is just adding another level of interest, I think, that the film did get made. Most people who like it, love it. If they've seen it, it's very hard to resist, I think, Night Moves. And yet the novel exists. How can you not, put it out there? So I don't know. It's going to be very hard to think of, if I don't go down the novelizations route, doing a nice range of novelizations. But I'm fighting with myself over that because the novelizations are out there and they're so great to collect. I know Quentin Tarantino famously collects novelizations of films he likes, and it is a wonderful but terribly expensive. It can be expensive, but you can also obviously shop at charity shops and stuff like that. But it's just the storage space. I mean, who am I telling?
Yeah, you're telling me.
They're
oh my
really
God.
small paperbacks. They're so tiny,
Yeah,
and yet if you get like 300 of them, you need to move house.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to go back 1 second to Night Moves and the thing about the chess that I think what you were saying was interesting, because obviously that links him to Philip Marlowe, Raymond Chandler's great hero, and again, I mean, Philip Marlowe is a kind of hero, but also, he's somebody who he's the first person narrator, and so he's very much in control of the narrative, his language and his way of dealing with the cases. You see everything through his eyes, but he's by no means perfect, and he's constantly there's a sense that throughout the novels he's criticizing society and specifically Los Angeles and the changes that he's seeing Los Angeles go through. But at the same time, Los Angeles is kind of criticizing him and is showing him to be sort of this disappointed sort of throwback, really. And sometimes there's a vibrancy to the characters that he's meeting that you're supposed to not necessarily like, or villains or whatnot. That exceeds, you've been with Philip Marlowe for quite a while now, so you're sort of thinking, yeah, actually, this guy's got a point, or this lass has got a point. The other thing, so there's that. There's also Dashiell Hammett with the Continental Op and Maltese Falcon and Sam Spade. Probably Sam Spade, along with Philip Marlowe, are the two most famous of the hard-boiled detectives. Although Sam Spade only appeared in one book, the Maltese Falcon. All over Dashiell Hammett books has a nameless protagonist called the Continental Op, who was to some degree also a kind of precursor to the Man with No Name. It's that idea of the nameless hero. So there, and the idea of the chess moves that you have in Night Moves, obviously moves in the title is interesting. Is that there has been. This is a guy who's in the later part of his life. He's in middle age, and his achievements are all in his youth. And he is looking at a chess problem from the past in which a mistake 2 moves ago means that you'll lose the game 6 or 7 moves ahead. And it's essentially, I mean, he says this to one of the people he's taught, because he keeps bringing back this chess thing, and he says kind of, this guy doesn't know he's already lost, and he had a chance of winning.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, you're talking about yourself, aren't you?
Yeah,
You know
that's what
that.
you call a synecdoche, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
like it's like everything about this guy.
Yeah.
Everybody plays him. Everybody outplays him in real life. His marriage has failed. Almost his first job as a private investigator is to follow his wife, to see that she's like, seeing this other guy. They go to a movie together, and it's just like he's failed from the get-go. He's already, as you say, his successes in the past. He kind of doesn't know with this case that he's already lost as well, because just being the patsy who's kind of hired to investigate this whole sorry business. And of course, the story is set in the film business, as well. So there's, like Alan's kind of bringing his. And I mean, he's as a Scot sort of living in Los Angeles, he's got that perfect kind of outsidery kind of feel to him as well. And he brought all of his the kind of the I don't know, not the darkness, but the sort of cold, bleak, whatever. There's all of that playing on it as well. And you could just imagine like Alan Sharp coming into like, the Sunshine State. Oh no, that's Florida, but also and California as well, and being out there in the kind of bright light and being a sort of a drinker and a drug taker and all of that stuff, and womanizer, multiple marriages, chaos all around him, children across the scattered across the globe. I mean, absolutely, like living a kind of wild life, much wilder than his kind of slightly sad sack protagonist, Harry Moseby, but it's all informed by that. And again, Harry really is an innocent in a way. None of his kind of fucking up is really, you can really pin on him. It's just like he's kind of a flawed man, and everything that happens to him, for me at least, I kind of was sympathetic towards, even if I was like, cringing at the mistakes that he was making. But yeah, you're absolutely right. He has no idea that he lost multiple moves ago, and that like taking this case would be his kind of downfall, So
Yeah, I mean, it's when he walks into his wife's business, and he's sort of so resentful of the gay guy that she works with, and it's really rancidly homophobic to him.
yeah.
And again, that reminds me of Philip Marlowe. There's a whole book in which, I think it's The Big Sleep, I think it's the first one, where the homophobia just is obsessive in that book. It just runs all the way through it. And then the second book, it's about race, and it runs all the way. It's almost like each book is about a certain type of bigotry. And I'm absolutely sure Raymond Chandler, shared that bigotry. I'm not, I'm not sure Alan Sharp did, but I'm sure Chandler did to some degree. But he's too good a writer to not allow the other side in, and that's what makes it fascinating, and that's why I always argue against cancelling books or cancelling writers for their perceived attitudes, is because if you're a good artist, if you're a good writer, you can't help, even despite your own opinions, allowing the truth into your world. This is what Percy Shelley mentioned when he talked about the unacknowledged legislators of the world. Poets are the unacknowledged legislators. They're unacknowledged not by other people, they're unacknowledged by themselves. They don't know that this is what they're doing. And so you can have someone, well, to use a Scottish example, Sir Walter Scott, who was a complete conservative, write novels in which he actually kind of seemed to sympathize with the revolutionaries. And you can have someone like William Godwin, who was a complete lefty, write another novel in which he seemed to actually side with the landed classes. And see in Caleb Williams, see that the sort of the servant who is pursuing the master vengefully is actually the baddie, And so why are these guys writing novels whose ideology is subverting what they actually believe in? Well, it's because they're artists, and they can't help it. It's not, it's beyond them.
Yeah. I mean, isn't there a certain, I don't know anything about academia, having left school at 15 and sort of never looked back, you know this much better than me, but isn't there a branch of sort of academia that is very much about debating both sides of an argument so that you can sort of take either position and sort of hold your own in that? So maybe it's also about being able to see the other side of a story and thinking that they've got the better story.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's many times that will be given to you as an assignment where you actually have to take a position and argue it, take a position you thoroughly disagree with and argue it. I mean, that the training for that is probably quite familiar to anyone who studied law, because it doesn't really matter if you agree with your client or you agree with the ultimate aims of the company you're defending or whatever. You're looking at their interests and you're trying to pursue them to the best of your efforts, the best of your capabilities.
I think sometimes the chemistry of between a director and a leading man with different political sympathies can be very interesting to explore. I'm not sure I've ever read a book that sort of looks into that, but I mean, I guess what comes to mind is like Kurt Russell and John Carpenter, who have very different politics but work together multiple times, and how sometimes those politics might kind of rub up against each other and perhaps make for a more interesting film simply because of the sort of the clash of ideas.
Yeah, and writers and directors. I mean, Frank Capra was, pretty right wing, and his writers were sort of, being chased by McCarthy all the time. So, It's a Wonderful Life is a real critique of capitalism, directed by a guy who thinks capitalism is wonderful, and so
right.
it's
James but also
Stewart
knows financially which side his bread is buttered, and
absolutely
the are the ones who pay his mortgage.
Exactly, and Jimmy Stewart's pretty right wing, and yet he's always playing Joe Schmo roles. I think that I think there's a lot to be said for that. I think there's a lot to be said for people. I just, this is where our current fascination with purity tests and what people say in interviews and what people say, I think it's just it's got way out of hand, and it has a very naive view of how art operates. We did this thing happened in literature in the 1940s, 50s, 60s. I'm not quite sure where we had the death of the author, which was this whole idea that it doesn't really matter what somebody says their work is about. The work, you just look at the work, because people don't know. Authors might lie. Authors might misunderstand their own works. Authors might be the least informed readers of their own work. And this was always seen as a form of liberation. The last line of the essay is, the author is dead, so that the reader can live. Long live the reader.
When I was young, I used to take such a dim view of that attitude, and I remember somebody doing an analysis. It seems so naive now, but I was very young. But and I was just kind of forming my critical thinking brain. But I remember reading, like, what do they know? They only wrote it. And I know what it was about specifically. It was about the Western episode of The Prisoner called Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling, which was basically they had to make some filler episodes to fulfill the American order for the British TV series. And they had like a Western set and some costumes or whatever. So they asked the writer who wrote the teleplay, can you just like knock up a Western, but in the world of The Prisoner? And they were like, sure. And then there was this amazing analysis of how this kind of fed into like Western mythology and how that played into like Patrick McGowan's kind of lone, whatever with the system oppressed, whatever it was. And I just like threw the leaflet or whatever it was I was reading, the fanzine or something like that, like down in a huff. And then later on, I've come to realize that, oh my God, sometimes you're the last person to know what you're writing about, and you're not aware of what the story you're telling is, what you're processing through that story. And I find that much more fascinating way to look at it. Now, I'm not 100% able to divorce the artist from the art. I'm not, I don't have R.
What,
Kelly on my Spotify playlist, let's say. But, obviously there are degrees in which that's sort of possible. But how could you, I mean, God help me, I haven't seen it in a long, long time, but Annie Hall is just fucking great, man. It's
oh yeah, yeah.
what can you do?
I mean, I think there's this dishonesty as well that that is happening a lot in the debate, which is these people haven't made good movies anyway, and these movies are all about middle-aged men who are having these crises, and white men who are having crises they don't compute, or we're no longer interested in them anymore. And I think that's a little bit dishonest, because I think, I mean, fair enough, it might not be your cup of tea, but if you're doing that kind of stuff and we flip it, and that if I were to say as a critic, well, I don't really like women talking because the movie is an all-female cast and the title is telling me exactly what I'm going to see, and I'm just going to avoid it because of that. Rightly, people would have a real problem with that attitude, and say that's narrow-minded and ignorant and stupid and sexist and misogynistic, and all of that would be true. I don't want to draw false equivalency, but if you're just sort of cutting out huge sections of lived experience, it's absolutely true that there has been the visibility of men and the visibility of men's concerns has been overemphasized in the past by cinema and by novels and what have you.
And the white experience as well, obviously.
Absolutely. In our culture, in this culture, which has promoted a sort of a certain homogeneity which has excluded lots and lots of people. And I absolutely agree with that critique. That's absolutely true. And it's also specifically true of a certain geographical area. It's not true of China. It's not true of India. So let's not be that universalist criticism as well is a little bit, they have their own problems. They have their own biases. They have their own, situations which need to be addressed. But I feel that, I feel that the critique that you can make is interesting, but not watching it or not addressing it or before presuming it's like this and I'm not seeing it. I just think that's the age-old mistake of prejudice. I don't think there's anything new in that, and I don't think there's anything revolutionary in that. And it seems to be a very easy refusal to disengage with something that you don't agree with for reasons that's not to do with the art itself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we probably all have a line that we draw somewhere, but I mean, on a long enough timeline, everyone's going to get cancelled because no one is going to pass the ultimate purity test.
Well, the purity test is going to change. I mean, do you think we've stopped?
No,
do you think this is it? Do you think the society we live in is perfect? I mean, this is the thing. It's I did a tweet a few weeks ago about a tweet. Sorry, I'm not on. That's my red line. I'm not on social. On
what do you call a post Twitter, on Blue Sky?
I don't know. A bike. I put a post up, and it was about a critic refusing to watch black and white movies, and somebody said, "Oh, quite a few people actually responded. Oh, my girlfriend won't watch anything before the 90s because of the misogyny they see, or the racism they see, or the homophobia they see, or whatever." First of all, that's a huge insult to a huge amount of cinema which is made by black people and by I mean, Jesus Christ, you're losing a few Spike Lee films already, if not loads of blaxploitation movies, loads of there were silent movies made by black film directors, for crying out loud. You go back to the 1915s, the 19-teens, and ditto women. Mabel Normand was making silent movies at the same time as Charlie Chaplin. You're going to just dismiss all of that with the pre-code movies with, Ida Lupino,
Yeah.
Elaine May, and not to mention loads of great movies which were not misogynistic. And how did we get to understanding what misogyny is, if not through people talking about it and commenting on it in the past? So
Yeah.
your feminism and our feminism and our anti-racism is built on the struggle of people from the past having these conversations. Now, back to Annie Hall. I'm not saying Annie Hall is hugely revolutionary work, but it is about Annie Hall. Is about uncertainty and anxiety. It's about self-doubt. It's about constantly worrying that you're in the wrong. It plays out from a very specific perspective, and you can critique that certainly, but it was hugely influential at the time, and it really speaks to its moment. You know, um, I would, I went out with a girl who was sort of utterly basing her fashion on Diane Keaton in Annie Hall, and really saw herself in Annie Hall. Really saw, oh my God, that's me. That's amazing. I love this film.
Yeah. I mean, Diane Keaton, to be fair, is still basing her fashion on on Diane Keaton in Annie Hall. Bless her. She's a style icon, of a particular kind.
Absolutely. I was reading Warren Beatty biography by Peter Biskind called Star, and she in that, Biskind is a little bit unreliable, but she in that comes over as quite interestingly not like the Diane Keaton you assume you're going to get. She's kind of like can be more than a match for Warren Beatty in her sort of strength of character and stuff, as you're not the sort of like la-di-da that you get in Annie Hall, certainly. So despite those superficial
it's acting, darling.
I exactly, yes, the costume, etc. But yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, one other thing about the novelizations, I was going to suggest one actually. The Hill, the Sidney Lumet film, was based on a novel.
Right.
That'd be an interesting one.
Yeah, that's a wonderful one. I would definitely. I'm going to actually write that down while I'm going to look into that, because
you heard it first.
Yes.
And the other one that
this is how these things happen. You'd be amazed at how flimsy and casual the ideas come out. I think I put out a tweet that you can literally still find, and I probably put it on my Plumeria Pictures Twitter feed as or X feed as how it started, how it's going. And the how it started was, somebody should really dig up the old novel that Night Moon, and then I kind of did it. And then how it's going was me like, but another one I've been trying to get the rights to is good Lord, what's it? Not the Gentleman's Agreement. What's the other one about the League of Gentlemen, not to be confused with the popular TV comedy show. Parts of which have probably been cancelled due to like blackface concerns or what, because it's all crazy. But so the League of Gentlemen, the film was based on a novel by John Boland, who was quite a successful novelist, and I've got absolutely nowhere. I've got multiple emails I just found this morning because I dredged it up from publishers saying, no, we had the rights to this till 1974, and then they reverted to the author's estate. I put a notice, like a little story in the local papers around Uckfield in Sussex, where the author's family lived. Nobody came forward to say, oh, I'm a relative of John Boland's, and I might have the rights to his book. So I've got a copy of the book. I can scan the text, but I can't publish it until I get the rights. And what's next? Hiring a Harry Moseby to go and track down the last surviving relative of John Boland so I can publish that novel? I probably will. That's the crazy thing. I probably will.
That would end badly. That would end badly.
Well, it could, yes,
someone
exactly.
better than Harry Moseby.
The next thing I know, a plane is flying at me with crashing into my boat and
I've
trying to kill
got
me.
I've got another suggestion
Ooh,
for
spoilers.
you. I've just got the spoilers. I think we can be safely assume that people listening to an
Well,
hour-long conversation about the novelization of Night Moves might be aware of the film Night Moves.
right.
What about this one?
Oh, well, fantastic.
The
Yes, the Medusa
Medusa
touch.
touch. Yeah.
Yeah,
Peter
totally,
Peter
totally.
Van Greenaway, and it's not a novelization. It's a novel. It was based on the novel, and it's I've read the novel, and it's really good.
Right.
It's a really
Oof,
great read.
that's really nice. Is it out of print? Because that's the first question.
That's the question, I
Yeah,
guess.
I'm pretty sure it will be. I'm pretty sure it
Where
will
would
be.
you find that out? I guess Amazon or something like that. If it only
Yeah,
comes
basically,
up
if
as
you can
a
see a recent edition of it on like what Amazon or one of its sock puppets, Abe Books or
is that an Amazon sock puppet now?
Goodreads. Yeah,
Oh.
they're all Amazon owned. Unfortunately, they've sort of hoovered up most of the things. So the bookshop.org. I mean, we don't sell our books on Amazon, so they're literally only available on plumeriapics.co.uk. Or sorry, I have to plug it a bit. Or you might find somebody's bought one and then read it and put it on eBay. But apart from that, they're not sold anywhere. We have to do direct mail only because they're so bloody expensive to produce these paperbacks, and a little bit expensive to ship
On
sometimes as well.
Amazon, I can find one copy of the Medusa Touch. Price £1,025.
Does that include the rights? Because if it does, I might be.
Yeah, exactly. That should be just the rights. But
If you buy this book, you will get the rights as well.
I'm
Okay,
not,
I'm
I'm
gonna
not,
I'll raise your Medusa touch, and I'll give an even more obscure one. And I think what I really want to do is actually remake the movie. But there's a movie called Paper Mask, which is about a fake doctor.
oh, with Paul McGann.
Yes, it's so great. I
Yeah,
love the movie. It
that's a great
stands
film.
up brilliantly,
Yeah,
based on a
yeah.
novel, which I have actually been trying to get the rights to, but I can't make up my mind whether what I really want to do is remake it or republish it. But I don't care. I just want, or I want to put Paper Mask out on Blu-ray. I just want everybody to know about that movie because it's so great. Amanda Donohoe,
I was talking about Paul
Tom
McGann.
Wilkinson.
Yeah, Paul McGann. I was in the Pordenone Silent Film Festival this week.
Hmm.
This week that we're talking is the beginning of October, and Paul McGann apparently is a frequent attendee of the Pordenone Silent Film Festival because he's a huge fan of silent movies.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's just one of those sort of like strange coincidences that you should mention Paper Mask. Of course, Paul McGann, most famous for Withnail and I guess Doctor Who was
Hmm.
he did
Yeah, he was Doctor Who in the Doctor Who
the
movie, wasn't he?
Spielberg movie, wasn't it? It was a sort of Spielberg produced movie.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I'd have to check your.
I've got a feeling it's one of those exec produced by Steven Spielberg, which I think at a certain time in the 80s and 90s, if you could run behind Spielberg and touch his coat, it
Yeah, you
was
got
legally executive produced by.
absolutely. Oh man, it's a. I think you can find it on DVD. I'm not sure if it's on digital. I'm not sure if you can get it on streaming. But Paper Mask is definitely well worth a watch. But I will look into The Hill. And what I'd love is if anybody comes at me with ideas for things to read, to bring back into print. I mean, I do love commissioning artwork for these covers because we do that with the Blu-rays as well. And I'm always excited to see what a cover artist. I mean, on the cooler, the sad thing was that we asked a Blu-ray cover designer called who goes by Time Tomorrow, who does a lot of really good Blu-rays, particularly for labels like Radiance and stuff like that. He did the great Planet of the Vampires limited edition Blu-ray that Radiance put out, one of our competitors. Shout out to them. And we commissioned him to do a cover for the cooler, and he sent me, I think, 8 options, and I said, "Can I have them all?" And I'll do like 100 of each edition or so, because they were just all so amazing. And he said,
Wow.
unfortunately, or they said, I should say, because I don't know what the pronouns are. They said, well, yes, but I'll have to charge you for each one to sort of work them up. I was like, oh no. So I have to pick my favorite. So ironically, I went with the chess cover for the cooler, which was, another chess themed. I've only just realized that that's got a chess theme as well. Maybe the next book I do should be an adaptation of Andrew Lloyd Webber's chess musical. Maybe we'll do a novelization. No.
It wasn't Andrew Lloyd Webber. It was Bjorn and Benny from ABBA with Tim Rice.
Oh, right. Oh, okay. Oh, that makes more sense.
Your
Right,
chess, you knock back on your Andrew Lloyd Webber
Damn,
knowledge.
you're right. You're right.
One Night in Bangkok by Murray Head. And the one that I sing so often is whenever my wife says something that she said to me 100 times, like a criticism, I sing "You Know Me So Well."
Nice.
Which Elaine Page and Barbara Dickinson sang as a duet about their cheating husband/lover.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Isn't there another suitcase in another hall from that as well?
Oh, could well be, yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
We've gone down a bit of a rabbit
we've gone
hole.
down a rabbit hole, and we've been talking for an hour and 10/20 minutes. So yeah, exactly. So I'm going to put your details on the notes so people can find Night Moves and buy it directly from you, which I think is the best way of doing it. I would encourage everybody to do so because I think it's a wonderful book, really, really great novel. Anybody who likes the film will enjoy it. Anybody who likes, because it adds a certain depth and sort of an alternative cut to the movie, if you like. Anybody who enjoys detective fiction of the hard-boiled kind, Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler will enjoy it. Ross MacDonald is another great writer of this kind of American detective fiction. Ross MacDonald, who was famously translated to the big screen by Paul Newman, none other than Paul Newman, in films such as The Drowning Pool and Archer. So, David, thank you so much for joining me. And we didn't even talk about One Battle After Another, which we were supposed to do.
We'll come back to that. We'll do that offline. But yes, they're not pastiches. That's the thing. They might have the reflection of the hard boiled detective fiction, and there may be some kind of some knowing, winks, but they are definitely not pastiches. They are. I would absolutely hold up Night Moves against it. If you run out of your favorite hard boiled detective fiction, I don't know about Ross MacDonald, but I would definitely look into them. But yeah, I think this is just a cracking detective novel, and I'd love somebody to read it who hasn't seen the film, and to put something in the comments.
Absolutely.
So if you haven't seen the film, read the book, then see the film, and then tell me, and then come back to us and and write something in the comments. In the meantime, like, subscribe, and remember to leave Riders on Film a lovely review because it helps the algorithm.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, David.
All right. Thank you, John. Take care. Bye.